Welcome to the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, where there's always another secret.
Welcome back, Sixers, to another episode of the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. This is episode 118. Today is September 12th, 2022. I'm Bill, and I'm joined, as always, by my imposing co-hosts, Amy and Jordan.
I was going for imposing.
I don't think I've ever been...
You were going for imposing?
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever been called that before, but thank you.
I'm sure your kids say it.
Maybe.
That's true. In the words of Captain Hook, to a 10-year-old, I'm huge. Before we get started, though, we do want to remind our listeners that the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is not a spoiler-free podcast. If there's something in the Cosmere that you haven't read and you're worried about hearing spoilers, we would recommend reading those first, then coming back and joining the discussion. In this episode, we're going to take a look at two characters who you might not always compare, but who have an interesting common link. We're comparing Vin from Mistborn Era 1 and Elhokar from the Stormlight Archive, two characters who came into prominence after being in the shadows of near-legendary figures Kelsier and Gavilar, respectively. So, for those of you who listen to the podcast recordings or watch the videos on YouTube, we do want to remind you, you can interact with us live via chat as we record each episode at www.twitch.tv/InkeepersTable. We record episodes every other Monday night, starting at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, so please join us and take an active part in the show. The Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies is made possible by the support of our listeners and patrons. The show will, of course, continue to be free, but if you want to help us out, head on over to patreon.com/Cosmere Studies. Even pledging a couple bucks per episode will really help us out as we work to improve the show. Patrons get immediate access to our Discord channel where you can talk about the show and the Cosmere with other listeners. It's a great community. We've got some great discussions. We talk about, honestly, anything under the sun in there. There's, of course, a lot of Cosmere chat, but it's not contained to that. You also get early access to bonus episodes, exclusive access to other bonus content, and other good stuff. So, before we dive in, though, Jordan, how's the read-along coming?
So, people have... Because I said we're going to do all of Shadows of Self in one episode. Some people have requested maybe doing a call-in episode on that. We're going to take that risk. So next Monday at this time being when we're streaming live, for those of you in the podcast, I can't be held to your coterminous state. That's not my fault. I'm going to do a call-in episode. It'll just be me. And so if you're a patron who would like to be involved in that, you're in hopefully the Discord, and if you're not, you should become a patron and do that, because it'll make your life better. Go into the hashtag Jordan channel and say I'd like to participate, so I kind of have an idea of how many people want to do it.
I'm going to say it. Mm-hmm. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, no, I see nothing wrong with saying that.
Sounds good. All right, next.
I reserve the right to edit it however I want after, though.
Okay. Well, next, Amy, guess what time it is?
You're doing the sound. Yes.
It's quiet again.
It is.
I think it's quiet when you stream. You know what? We're just going to deal with it. I'll bet that every time our podcast listeners are just like, no, it sounds normal. Because I always go in and edit it.
Let us know if it's normal.
It's fine.
So, Amy, why don't you tell us, since you're the one who found this one?
So, I wander around on TikTok a lot, and there's a maker or creator called Stormlight Memes, and she's really delightful. She's really super fun on there. And she did a little, in preparations for Lost Metal, she did a little parody song where she changed the lyrics and summed up the Final Empire book.
Yeah,
and
so
it's just fun.
she took the she added lyrics to the Gallop Infernal from Jacques Offenbach's Orpheus in the Underworld. Most of you probably know that as the Can song.
I know it as the guilty pleasure song by the Nostalgia Critic.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, the lyrics recap the story of the Final Empire. So
And it's really fun. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that detail, but that's nice. Yeah, that's right there. And she does it, and it's just fun.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep. So it's one of those standard TikToks sitting in your car, singing unaccompanied, but it's fun stuff, and really she's got a good meter on it.
Yeah, and she's
the only complaint I have is she's called Stormlight Memes, and this is clearly Mistborn, so false advertisement.
She does all
yeah,
Cosmere stuff.
I have a feeling Cosmere memes might already be taken.
I don't know.
Well, and honestly, isn't Mistborn a prequel to the Stormlight Archive?
In some ways, yes.
There we go.
You could take it that way. There you go.
All right, well, let's move on. The next segment that we've got Sanderson News. I'm working on a soundbite. I don't have it ready. Sorry, guys.
Sanderson News.
No. I'm thinking more. Anyway, we'll go into it later. So the past couple weeks, first off, the most important thing that we learned in Brandon's announcement, he has a fish tank.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad that was the main takeaway here, because
that is the main takeaway. Because
I had similar feelings.
And based on the floor for the area where he is, it's like that black and white checker. I'm guessing that's in his theater, in his lair.
It could be, and it's a big one. It's like floor to ceiling, like one of those really tall, cool ones.
It's big.
It's big.
It's an imposing fish tank.
We're going back to imposing. So,
anyway.
But actually, one of the big announcements is that Brandon made a Stormlight update on Reddit. We have a link in the show notes if you want to check that out. We'll also try and put that in the in the description and all that stuff. And if you're watching the YouTube video, etc., we'll make it available. And Stormlight, but now at this point, Stormlight 5 has been set aside, and now he's focusing on Defiant, which is the last book in Skyward. So cool. Now, the one that I'm really excited about, starting tomorrow, it'll be yesterday if you listen to this on the day that the video/podcast episode is published, is a new Kickstarter, because Brandon is now all about Kickstarters. No, we're not getting more secret books. And I doubt this is going to be, beat his record for biggest Kickstarter of all time. But who knows? But he and Brotherwise Games, they're the people who made the Call to Adventure, the Stormlight Archive board game. They are making miniatures based on Stormlight characters. Right now, there is no game that these miniatures are tied to. Apparently, there is thought going into that, but for now, there's just no game. But these things are gorgeous.
Pretty.
Do you know if these will be compatible with Smash Brothers?
I don't think they're amiibo compatible.
Oh,
no.
Okay, dang it.
I mean, now if you want to solder an RFID chip on the bottom or something, I don't think anybody would stop you. But that's entirely up to you.
Velociraptor jumps through the window. No.
But these are seriously gorgeous. Isaac has been working very closely with them to make sure that these actually follow canon. Like Brandon has said that he was thinking about just sort of letting them do what they want. He's like, no. He and Isaac talked, and they're like, we should actually put some actual stuff out there, like physical references for people. And this is a great opportunity. So that starts tomorrow on September 13th. And I'm guessing it'll go for 30 days. Typical Kickstarter time is my assumption.
Probably, yeah.
So,
the thing that was interesting was him just talking about how in the past they didn't feel like they really needed to do canon, images of characters.
Depictions,
but they've sort of changed their mind on that.
They want there to be. I mean, I think they're still very pro fan art and everything.
Oh, absolutely.
But they're like, but this is the standard. Like, this is the agreed on look for the character, and
Yeah. Next cool thing is next week, Bastille versus the Evil Librarians comes out. I've been waiting for this for a long time. And yeah, I'm excited about that. This is one of the few Brandon books that I prefer to read the physical copy than listen to the audiobook.
Because there's a lot of wordplay and stuff.
There's
with the
so
text,
much
right?
wordplay and visual humor in them. This is not specifically a Brandon thing. This is an example from another book that I think kind of ties into the sort of humor. If you've ever read A Series of Unfortunate Events, in one of the books, there's a page where they start explaining what deja vu means. You turn the page and it's the exact same page as before.
Because there's deja vu.
It's that sort of play. There's a lot of visual play and jokes with it, and I think it's great. So I'm really looking forward to that one. Have either of y'all read the Alcatraz books?
I've read like the first 2, and it's been forever.
Shame on
I
you
think
both.
I know. But my son is actually reading the first one right now.
Cool.
So
I've given it away as a gift. Does that count?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, well, then that's a problem.
That means you have literally distanced yourself from it.
No, it was a good gift.
Away.
Did a good job here.
Mm-hmm.
No, I keep meaning to catch up on them, but now my reading list is not actually as terrible, so maybe I can actually try again.
Yeah.
So.
For a short time, I don't know how long, they are giving away a free Bands of Mourning ebooks.
That's with Tor, right?
I believe so. I think that's on Tor.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also just finished their T-shirt contest that's going to go out as part of their sort of swag package if you order that with book 4 from their website. And I believe they picked a Wayne's haberdashery.
There were like two different ones with Wayne's hats, because they had one that was supposed to be Wayne's hat, haberdashery, and they had another one that was supposed to be in-world, and that one also ended up being kind of Wayne centric, I think.
Well, of course. Well, and I think that was actually the prompt.
Well, they had 3 different prompts. They had an in-world. One of them was an in-world product, and so I think that might have been.
And so they sort of combined it.
Yeah.
So. Well,
Did
cool.
we see what the shirts were?
They did put pictures up on.
Yeah, if you check out his video, he shows it during the announcement video from today. Okay. So that would be the September 12th.
The other one was like
video.
Wax Falling, I think was the other one.
I missed it. So anyway. the first one is the winner is gonna be part of the shirt, and the other 2 they're gonna do something with, but they haven't announced what yet. So
yeah.
And that's the news.
Ta-da!
So guys, let's dive into the discussion points for this. Okay, so for our listeners, like I said, we're looking at Vin and Elhokar. Now, a lot of people probably think that's kind of a weird comparison, but when you look at it, there are some really interesting parallels between the 2 of them, because both of them sort of grew up, Elhokar for a much longer time than Vin, in the shadows of these giants among their peers, the ones that everyone around them just sort of saw as this larger than life figure. And then both of them were cut down, murdered, and they were kind of the next default person to step into that role, and they both handled it very, very differently. So
yeah, it's interesting because in the character, because it's a similar situation, but the characters couldn't be any more different from the start. Vin is a street urchin. Elhokar is literally the crown prince. Vin is a girl. He's a boy.
Vin is adopted. Elhokar is the born heir,
the biological son.
From birth, he's been raised to be the heir.
Equivalent, yeah.
Yeah, Vin has nothing. He has everything. But at the same time, there are some very interesting parallels because they both, in some ways, don't want it.
Yeah.
Because Vin much more literally. Elhokar just doesn't want the burden of his father's shadow.
Right.
It stresses him out. Yeah, it's a lot to take on.
Well, it's not only that. I mean, you got to remember, And part of this is from the preview of the book 5 prologue for Stormlight.
Yeah.
Gavilar did not look highly upon his son.
He did not.
No.
And you can't help but notice that if you grow up in that environment. And it's clear that Elhokar idolized his father. So did Yasna. They both loved their fathers, and had very, very complicated relationships with them too.
Yeah.
And but having that sort of situation and knowing that your father sees you as essentially a failure, I mean, that's gonna tear you up.
It's gonna set you up for failure in most ways because it's gonna get into your head, and so you'll second guess yourself. You'll doubt you. The confidence is gonna be extremely hard to have.
Well, especially compared to, because both Gavilar and his uncle Dalinar were men of extreme confidence, at least outwardly. Now, Dalinar, that changed with time due to his own trauma. I feel like it's the SpongeBob meme of the rainbow and just have the word trauma.
Yes.
And that's a good explanation for Brandon Sanderson's writing style.
I was thinking from Gravity Falls. I've been traumatized.
Yeah, same energy. But no. So one of the big things that's interesting is while both were essentially martyred, within their respective universes, one of the big differences, Kelsier was planning for it. This was his big Thanatos gambit, and what he didn't just leave Vin alone. He left her with notes. He left her with a full team of very competent mentors who could keep helping her beyond his own death.
He also left her with relationships with each of those mentors because he had given them very specific one-on-one time.
And he had trained her personally, and he was nice to her.
And meanwhile,
Gavilar was not.
Well, and meanwhile, Gavilar planned to live forever.
Yeah.
So he had not prepared anyone for his demise because he wasn't expecting it to happen.
Yeah, he was like, well, I'll just do it, and I mean, I think, and he wanted to just kind of sell Yasna off as a bride, and then Elhokar, I think he was just kind of like, well, whatever with that, because
because there was no, like, he didn't need to worry about it.
He didn't need an heir because he was going to live forever.
Yeah, one of the things he talked about was the fact, we'll talk about when this book comes out eventually. He talks about how if I'm going to be this eternal king, like, I can't be sitting here worried about these short-term relationships because I'm going to live forever. I got to think long term. I got to be practical about this. And it just occurred to me that I didn't think about it when we proposed this concept. Well, no, in our meeting long time ago. But the two mentors have met.
They have.
Yes,
and
they
Kelsier
have.
Tried to give him advice, and Gavilar didn't. I mean, by that point, he was already doomed. But
good guy Kelsier trying to give him advice.
Yeah.
No, but it's sort of that, but it's a huge difference. Kelsier acts like he's gonna live forever, didn't plan on it, then it kind of accidentally made it happen.
Yeah.
Gavilar was trying to live forever, and he ain't.
Nope. Not unless something really big changes.
Which there are all sorts of speculations about that. Gavilar is going to be Odium's champion and all sorts of weirdness.
I think he's dead.
I think he's dead too.
I'm hoping he is because he just needs to be done. Terrible man.
Well, Gavilar wasn't holding any Stormlight or anything when he was cut down, so he wasn't like super invested.
Yeah.
Which is one of the big things that's happened to the people who have survived death from what we've seen.
But I mean, we don't know, so there's always that sliver of doubt until end of book 10.
Well, it's mechanically, it just seems unlikely because one of the reasons Kelsier was able to last as long as he did is when he died, he was mainlining Ruin through the 11th metal, and so he was about as heavily invested as a Mistborn can get at the time of his death.
Yeah.
Wait, through the 11th metal? What do you mean? Oh, because it's Palladium. Right,
yeah, because
right.
he was burning it. He was burning it as the
An
Lord
alloy
Ruler
of
approached
adium.
him.
Right.
Because he's like, all right, how's this work? How's this work?
I'm doomed.
I don't think this is going to work. Well, time for that speech I prepared.
It's like, oh no, it's not a nuke. It's plans for a nuke. And I can't beat this guy with plans.
The thing in Kelsier's favor, he kind of assumed that's what was going to happen anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Because he admits that in his letter to Vin. And that's one of the cool things about it is he leaves her this letter and he's apologizing for putting this on her.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the plan.
Yeah.
He's, to take down the Lord Ruler. And so, and you see it when, in Secret History, you see how much he laments what he's done when he sees Vin, crying over his body in the middle of everything. And he's just like, oh no, like just because you can tell it tears him up inside.
Right.
But he's like, well, this is for the greater good of taking down the Lord Ruler. Meanwhile, Gavilar is actively pushing his entire family to the side because it's for the greater good.
But it's actually just for his good.
Yeah, it's the difference between, and that's why I feel like a lot of times Kelsier does get a bum rap. Because a lot of people talk, because Brandon did make that offhand comment of in another story, Kelsier would be the villain.
He said it a lot of times. It's something he clearly wants us thinking about.
Right. But at the same time, that doesn't mean like just because in another context he would have been the villain. In this is the context we have.
Yeah.
So he's not the villain right now. Like who knows what'll happen in Mistborn Era 3.
And I mean, there are plenty of times that there are villains who have very moral or reasonable reasons.
Absolutely.
They do terrible things in the process of it, which makes them.
But what I'm saying is with Kelsier, the fact that Gavilar's reaction when he died, and he's talking to the Stormfather, is basically he's thinking of himself.
Oh yes,
when Kelsier dies, and then he sees Vin, his thought is, "Oh no." He cares about her. He's worried about her. Gavilar doesn't care what anybody else thinks or how they feel.
Well, no, by the time he even starts thinking of anyone else, it's him suddenly realizing what a bad shape he's going to leave everything because he put everything on himself.
Right.
Yep, because he didn't bother to share.
And so he just realizes, oh no,
this
could be a disaster.
Which again, you look at Kelsier. He built a group of people to hold things up after he was gone, because he realized he was the keystone, and so he built a secondary arch so that you could remove said keystone and still support the structure.
Yeah. Now, he did do it in such a way that it aggrandized his legend, and that's what, moving back to Vin and Elhokar, causes Vin a lot of problems, especially in the second book. They keep calling her the survivor's heir, and she's like literally like going and finding the dark alleyways, trying to avoid everyone because all these, religious zealots are like, what do we do now? Survivor's heir. And she's like, I'm not special. Stop it.
Well, it's really interesting because we see all this, and as deep and as emotional as their connection was, they only knew each other for a year.
Yeah.
It was intense though.
Like the first book took place over the course of about a year. And that was the first she ever met him.
Yep.
And yet their relationship was much closer than Elhokar's was with Gavilar. But so if having only known him a year, suddenly everyone is calling you his heir, and she's just like, I'm a nobody. I'm trying to hide, because that's what she'd been doing in Kammen's crew. She tried to hide. She tried to make herself look unremarkable because Reen had taught her that's how you survive.
It's interesting because there's another parable there, because in that same book, we get a lot of Elend talking about Kelsier and trying to, because he's suddenly kind of because he's accidentally in charge of Kelsier's crew now, and
He's the heir-in-law.
yeah, and he's just like, I don't know how to do this. This guy. It shows like Kelsier's shadow so deep that like in that book we get I think no less than 5 people's perspective on living in Kelsier's shadow. Because you got Vin, you got Elend, you get Breeze and Clubs in their hilarious scene right before the Koloss attack. And you also get Doxson talking about it. But Doxson is lamenting, Kelsier, as usual, has left me to pick up his mess.
I have to take care of all the people, do all the things.
But all of them in a certain way they think about living in that shadow, and all come to very different conclusions. Clubs and Breeze talk about how Kelsier's insane. He shouldn't have done this because we're not administrators, we're thieves. We can carry out a plan, but this is something completely different. Doxson is thinking how they didn't follow through. They should have killed all the nobles, and then Doxson, and that's what Kelsier would have done. And then, like, right before his death, Doxson acknowledges, no, then we would have been no better than the Lord Ruler. And Doxson realizes that because he's the one, like, of all of them, Doxson's the one that burns with the same passion that Kelsier did. And had that hatred for nobility, which made his and Ellen's relationship so difficult.
Yeah.
And then that's the book where Vin finally steps out of Kelsier's shadow and steps into her new role, because but she does it using one of Kelsier's lessons, the lesson of trust the people around you.
Well, and it's interesting because when you look at the two characters, they each sort of had their moment of realization on screen, or a moment of realization. There's obviously going to be more than one as life goes, but I keep coming back to this scene where Vin is with the crew and they're planning, and she looks at the door and she sees in her mind the girl she was a year prior. This shy, shrinking girl who was afraid to be noticed, who was afraid to make any connection with any individual because that's how you get hurt. And then she looks around and realizes that she's built essentially a family, that she's not alone, that she is in a more personal sense, safe. Meanwhile, Elhokar comes to his own personal realization, and it's a very different scene. The scene where he's basically drunk himself into a stupor when Kaladin comes in and has a conversation with him where he's talking about, he's realizing he's a bad king, how he's a failure, how nobody likes him, and he's just absolutely in despair. But it's sort of his own realization of, because Brandon has said that Elhokar's first truth as a light weaver would have been, I'm a bad king.
That's an interesting thing, because comparing the two, we see Vin rise up due to the positive influences of her shadow. Elhokar is simultaneously trying to live up to his father's expectations, but the one thing we can say, he is not Gavilar. He doesn't have that charisma. He doesn't have that physical imposing figure the way both him and his uncle had. He doesn't have his way of words. And nowhere close does he even have anything near the advantage of who his wife is compared to, Aesudan versus Navani. Jeez Louise.
Right.
Yeah.
We see from Yesna's perspective, even early on, and Navani's perspective early on, that Aesudan is kind of a tool.
She's a conniving.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so he's surrounded by all these people who, even the people who love him, they don't think a lot of him. And so he has confidence issues. And so he does what a lot of people who have confidence issues do some of the time. They try and make up for it by being bold. I think like the first scene with Dalinar and him, like they're in their storm plate and he decides he's going to climb this thing and he probably shouldn't do it. And he then tries to take on a chasm fiend because that's what his father would have done. And he's trying to live up to this image of who he is, but he's struggling to learn to become the kind of king he should be. But partially that's because he also tried to listen to good advisors, and that ended up with, the business, with Moash's family, which then caused all the problems in Kaladin's family. And he sits there. He's like, I'm trying to do a good job, but everything I do turns out wrong.
Well, and the thing that he doesn't realize is, because he's trying to do all the things, accomplish all the feats that he saw his father accomplish. But what he doesn't realize is he doesn't see the preparation that his father put into everything, the training, the hard work to get there, that the Dalinar does. He's like, people see you and they respect you. Why don't they respect me? And it's just like, they don't respect necessarily who he is now. They respect the road that he's traveled to get there, journey before destination. And Gavilar is trying to reach the destination, but he hasn't taken the proper journey.
Yeah, and the same with Elhokar.
And that's what we see with Vin. We see Vin taking that journey across, from the waif to, at the end of the Final Empire, who she becomes then, and then all the way through the Hero of Ages, because that whole thing is her journey. We don't really see Elhokar beginning his actual journey until shortly before he dies. Yeah, which is why people get so mad. Yeah. Because they saw him and he's starting to get it, and as soon as he started to get it, the opportunity was taken from him.
Yeah, because you saw some pieces of it in Words of Radiance near the end.
When Shallan made the drawing, or is that Oathbringer?
Well, that was part of it, I think.
No, near the end with the conversation with Kaladin.
Yeah, well, because he had a couple conversations with Kaladin, but part of it was he realized, because Dalinar's taking control of everything, and he starts to just drink himself to numb the pain. And which is interesting, because that means the person he's taking after isn't his father, it's his uncle.
Right. Yep. Which is honestly the better person to take after anyway, but he's taking after him in the worst. Yeah. At his worst.
Not the alcoholism,
Yeah. Well, it's just avoiding the issue rather than facing it head on. But it's Kaladin who makes him start to see that, I am a bad king. But once he sort of starts admitting that to himself, he's able to start making better decisions.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he actually starts looking like a leader. He starts behaving like one.
Yeah.
But he had to sort of stop.
He's just been self-doubt. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, basically he has to sort of stop caring about the shadow at all.
Right.
That's an interesting issue, because that's not something Vin does. Vin's always thinking about Kelsier throughout the entire trilogy, and what would Kelsier do? Vin's different, because Vin, like, even at the end of Final Empire, Vin finds oh my goodness, who's Goradel. And she knows Kelsier would have killed this man. I'm not going to do that. And because she decides, this is where I'm going to be better than my shadow.
Which leads to, epic events in Hero of Ages, that one act of mercy.
Yeah. Well, it also leads to epic events in the sequel, not trilogy at this point, but people. I only remember this because we just finished Shadows of Self. Captain.
Demu?
No. In the second era 2, it's Captain something Del. He's a descendant of Goradel, and it's like he's the first royal person. My good, this is gonna bug me. Coppermine, save me. Anyway,
the guy who becomes the
Constable General Aradel.
Aradel.
Oh,
right.
Aradel. That's right. I did
Yeah.
think that was an A.
And so, like, but that one act then has this cascading effect.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
This act of mercy that, and it's even Kelsier comments on that in Secret History, because he's the one who sets things in motion that get Goradel killed.
Mhm.
And Kelsier's like, just sort of like, Vin spared him. I somehow got him killed again. Like, I in the end, I did end up getting this man killed. Now, in an epic fashion that's a worthy death. He took on a freaking the Steel Inquisitor and put up a fight.
But yeah, no, it's just that's a really interesting observation of for both of them kind of to make the transition that they need to grow past it. They do kind of have to let go of the shadow, which I'm going to get a little bit personal here. Y'all are aware that my dad passed away a couple of years ago. And that's one of the hardest things to do, is to finally let go. Because my dad was one of those everyone knows him, everyone respects him people. And it's so hard to kind of let go. But that's how I started healing and growing beyond it. And honestly, allowing it, the loss even, to become a growing opportunity is hard as it is. And so it's interesting seeing that for both of them, that's kind of what they needed to do. In the second book, Vin had to kind of grow beyond the shadow that she kept herself in, and Elhokar had to realize, okay, I don't need to just sit here and think, what would my father do? I'm the king. What is the right thing to do? And that's how they both kind of start actually progressing again.
Yeah, it's one thing to try and follow your predecessor and like exactly, but you're not that person. You're a different person. You're going to have different strengths and weaknesses, and you're going to be in different situations. And so that's where Vin, like you were saying, she's able to take, this is the lesson Kelsier would have done, but
I'm not Kelsier.
I'm not Kelsier. I'm going to do it my way, and then it still works out.
It's one of my favorite moments from the first season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where Q shows up and he's taunting Captain Sisko, and Sisko just decks him across the face, and Q looks at him and he says, "You hit me. Jean-Luc never hit me." And he grins at him and he says, "I'm not Jean-Luc."
It's like, that's not me.
And it was such a good moment, because when you create a new series like that, it's really easy to try and say, try and recapture the lightning in a bottle from the previous series, if it's a sequel series. And this was them saying, this is a sequel series. We are not trying to do the same thing over again. This is a different captain. You have all the arguments about Kirk and Picard, and I'm just like, no, Sisko. But that's the thing, is they differentiated it. They grew beyond it. They found their own identity, and it worked so well. But this isn't a Star Trek podcast.
No,
it's not.
No, something you said to go to a completely different medium again, reminds me something that like started at the beginning of the Pixar movie Onward. Where we get I forget all the characters' names, but we get at the beginning the kid, because he never got to meet his father, and one of the people says, "Hey, are you so and so's son?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh my goodness, yeah." And he starts like telling him like, "Oh, me and your father, and
Newman College, he's a great guy."
And he's like, "I don't like," he wants this, but he doesn't know it. And it's a similar thing for Vin and Elhokar, is they hear, well, Vin a little bit less so, because Vin knew Kelsier on a pretty deep level, but he's, Elhokar's always hearing the glory stories of, his father's war days from probably from Dalinar and Sadius. And he's trying so desperately to be that man, and to also like the Vengeance Pack. He's trying to get revenge on the people who killed his father, as far as he's concerned. And he's Dalinar's realizing this vengeance pact is slowly killing us.
Well, and part of the reason that Elhokar did it again is like, this is how Gavilar would respond in the same situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Elhokar
it's definitely the Alethi way. I mean,
exactly.
They're not going to respond to an assassination with diplomacy. What nation would just respond that way to regicide? But it's just one of these things. 10 years in, all the high princes are basically acting as their own kings again. It's just a fun game that they're now playing. It's not really about about the reason they went out there, and it's something that Elhokar's not stupid. Like, that's one of the things that a lot of people don't get is Elhokar knows what people say around him.
Yes.
And like far too much. He's paranoid.
Well, I mean, he is, part of that is due to the cryptics that he's seeing, but
Oh yeah, that would freak you out.
Well, but it's also due to the fact his father was assassinated.
Right.
And
his father was a beloved king.
Yeah.
It's like, if they're going to assassinate him, what chance do I have?
Yeah.
But he's so paranoid, but all combined with that paranoid, so lacking in self-confidence that he's like, I got to show them that this is what's going on, and so he fakes his own assassination attempt.
Oh yeah.
And
that's right.
And Dalinar literally has to knock sense into him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he tells him he's dating his mom, but
yeah.
That's a whole other set of.
By the way, your mother. It's, oh my goodness, snap.
What?
There's a line from an episode of Frasier. We're an odd little family, aren't we?
Oh my goodness, they are an odd little family. His uncle is his father-in-law. How weird is that?
Yep.
Yeah. But he's also
stepfather.
Dalinar. Stepfather.
Sorry, stepfather-in-law. No, that'd be even weirder.
Stepfather.
No.
Yeah.
It had to be stepfather. This isn't Game of Thrones. This is Mistborn.
No.
Anyway.
We're not gonna go there.
No, the other thing that's interesting as far as this whole comparison is going back to the setting people up to help you out. Is the effect of the death that it had on the people that should have been there, for the person. Because again, Kelsier planned for this so that when he died, everyone had tasks to do. And so everyone was pulling in the exact same direction. When Gavilar dies, Dalinar seeps further into horrible depression because he's like, I was drunk when my brother needed me the most. And Sadeas is over here. It's like, I was supposed to protect him. That's why that's why we gave Gavilar that thing, but it didn't work. But
I ran away from it.
Yeah.
Our ploy didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. And so both these men who should have been like the rock solid wall for Elhokar in his moment of need were got pulled in completely different directions on how to deal with things. Cause Gavilar goes back to the drink. He has that really cool scene with him and Navani, or not him and Yasna, where he has Yasna read him the Way of Kings.
Reads the Way of Kings, yeah.
Because both of them are trying to figure out why was he talking about this? What what is this?
They're trying to work through their grief in their own
together
different ways.
And so it actually does a great job of getting Dalinar and Yasna to bond. But Elhokar doesn't get that.
Right.
No.
And so Elhokar
in charge now.
Yeah. And so Elhokar tries to do what a responsible king would. A responsible king is going to stand up to the challenge, give a stiff upper lip. But he doesn't get to grieve the way that the others do.
And again, the person that he should have been able to lean on and grieve to was plotting against him, essentially, was Aesudan.
Yeah.
He couldn't trust his wife.
Couldn't trust
his wife. It was supposed to be it's supposed to be the strongest relationship you can have, but it wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was the opposite.
He couldn't trust his wife. Navani's going through her own issues because of,
Mhm.
the things that her and Gavilar said to each other for their last things.
Well, she prayed for him to die.
Yeah. So that's gonna mess you up a little
all
bit.
sorts of guilt and then like relief, but then guilt and then it's
Well,
all
and
sorts
then
of horrible.
Well, and then Sadius. At this point, I think Sadius is trying to do his best by Elhokar.
Oh yeah.
And so, but Sadius is a conniving person. Sadius is like, okay, it's revenge time. Let's go. And
all the other high princes were totally on board because again, this is the Alethi way.
And so it's just one of these things that all the people that should have been there for him were all dealing with their own various issues and mourning in their own way, and he again was kind of stuck alone. And it's this weird isolating thing because, like, being king, you have all these advantages. He has the best teachers, he has the best tutors, and all this other stuff.
Everything, yeah.
But he also has no one telling him no. And so he doesn't get that same, like, he needs a support of someone who's going to tell him, no, you need to stop, you need to look back, you need to grieve,
which he starts getting from Dalinar when Dalinar stands up to him. And that's when his journey to become better starts, is when Dalinar is just like, all right, we're not doing this anymore,
We're done.
He needed somebody to tell him no. To you can't just surround yourself with yes men.
He knows that, and he's trying not to do that because he learned the hard way. Like, you can tell, like, it doesn't hurt him as much as it should. But that whole business with what's the name of the Lord that ended up in Hearthstone? Forgetting his name.
Oh, Rashon.
Like, you can tell that does weigh on him. Like, because he talks about it. He's like, I tried to listen to the right people, and look where that got me. And and he's like, it hurts him.
Not realizing that these are the people, like, who Moash, that they're connected to Moash.
Yeah, and Kaladin.
Yeah.
And Kaladin,
yeah. But, like, Dalinar didn't. Dalinar's the one who uttered the line, we put him in some small town where he couldn't do any harm. And there's Kaladin just sort of like, that is a storm of a thing for you to say to me.
Like, oh, it does not go well.
Yeah, and so...
It's my little town.
But it's just one of those things where there's, it's the problem of when you're at the top of a hierarchy, you're looking down, and everything becomes a math problem because it's just, beyond about 200 people, the brain just can't handle that. Everything's just numbers once you get that high up.
The saying I've heard is, like, if 50 people, if there's a massacre and 50 people die, it's a tragedy. If 5,000 people die, it's a statistic.
Yeah.
Which is
well, especially for
it's a bitter thought, but
by that point you can't fathom it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you just sit there and it's just, you have to abstract it out because your brain can't even handle, like, the concept of that many people. Like, try and think of 50,000 people, and you're like, okay, I've been to a baseball game with about that many people. Okay, but that's your only real set of scale.
Yeah, it's something like that. My college football stadium seats 30,000. So we take that and then add half again or 2/3 again.
And
again, you've turned it into a math problem.
It's a math problem, exactly.
And you're just like, okay, so wait, which one has to go first for the egg to get across but not eat the chicken, or
the frog, or not the frog, the fox, and
the fox,
duck.
I've heard multiple.
Anyway.
Yeah, there's multiple versions.
The wolf, the sheep, and the cabbage. All sorts of.
No, but you sit here, and especially in a Alethi society with as warlike as they are, abstracting out death would be something that Elhokar is actually probably quite used to. Like, even at a young age, I bet he was, because he would be sitting in on those war meetings and trying to learn strategy and stuff like that. And so it's easy to abstract it out. But that's the other advantage Vin has, is Vin, it's on a personal level.
one of the things that I do like is that in spite of the fact that they're so different and that Elhokar does end up in a sort of a dark reflection of what Vin's journey is, it's not just Vin is good and Elhokar is bad.
Yeah.
Because like we said, towards the end, Elhokar does start to get it. He starts going on his right journey. And again, that's why people get so mad at that scene where people talk about like one of the most heartbreaking lines in the entire series is life before death, ... and it's cut off, or journey before. And it's just like, it's a tragedy because he was getting it and it was unrealized.
Right,
but the fact that Brandon put that in and let him, rather than, look, he's a bad king, he's a villain, he's dead, oh well. No, he was starting to get better, and that's why it's emotional.
Oh yeah, that scene.
I always come back to when Kaladin is waffling on saving Elhokar, because one, he's recovering from his injuries in the chasm, but also because
and the loss of Syl.
The loss of Syl, but also he's like, he deserves to die. Like, he's caused a lot of people death, and on top of it all, he's a bad king. Like, isn't it a better result overall if we let this man die and Dalinar inherits the throne? And which is very much no longer Journey Before Destination, but in the line he says to himself is, he's trying. Like, it's just, it's the one thing you can say about Elhokar is that, and the part that makes him a sufferable character, even when he's being a little bit insufferable, is this isn't coming from a place that's lacking sincerity. He is
earnest.
trying.
Elhokar is not Joffrey.
Yeah.
To bring Game of Thrones back into it, because honestly, it's not a bad leap to start comparing them, because they are these,
they are the son of legends who conquered the kingdom
and don't belong on the throne.
Yeah.
And are upset at people who recognize that they don't belong on the throne. But Elhokar is trying.
Joffrey's a monster.
Exactly. And Elhokar isn't.
And Elhokar's just incompetent.
He's weak, but he's not bad.
Yeah.
He's earnest, but just not there. And I mean, I think we didn't even really touch on the fact that he has Yasna as a sister, which would not help self-confidence at all.
No.
And I can't remember, is he older or is she older?
He's older. No, she's older.
Oh. I thought she was older.
Okay.
Yeah.
Looking
it
up.
Your big sister, and just even if she wasn't his big sister.
Even if she wasn't, she is his big sister.
Yeah. But that just, and it's
Yasna was older.
Like, okay. So it's not like Gavilar was respecting her more, I don't think.
Not at the time of his death. He clearly, whatever was going on when she was younger, he still thought of her as that girl.
Yeah, and at the time, like, I remember from the prequel chapter that he's just like, she just needs to get married off and just do what I tell her to do. And that's not respecting your kids either.
No.
You're doing that to them.
No, he's still just thinking of in terms of kingdoms. He's like, this is why Gavilar's a monster. He's abstracted out his family.
Yeah.
Like, he's abstracted
and
out.
Navani's just a resource, that does all the busy work over there. And
which is like all of them. It's like this is just one of those things where he's not even, like, we talked about abstraction being a problem for, kings and stuff. But the difference is he's abstracted out individuals, like the people he should be kind to. He thinks of them as resources to be spent. And it's like, okay, how is it best to spend this resource? Because it's one of those things. He clearly thinks Navani is a capable troubleshooter for all these logistics things. Like, he's not wrong. It's just that she could do so much more. But
she's more than that. Yeah.
Yeah, but that solves his problem right now. Yasna could do more, but if she marries Amaram, that solves his problem right now.
Yep.
If Elhokar is kind of useless, so he's there, But
just be over there, whatever. Yeah.
I'll use him to entertain the party guests while I'm not there, because that solves my problem right now. It's just everything is inward. Everything's thinking of him
Me.
while he's deluding himself into thinking, no, this is for everyone else. Because once I set up this utopia, everything will be great.
Yeah, it's like, oh no.
What's the Dr. Horrible line? The world is a mess, and I just need to rule it.
The status is not quo. The world is a mess, and I just need to rule it.
Yeah.
The status is not quo.
Oh, I love that. Anyway. All the random references. It's fine.
All the random references. Yeah, that's today's episode.
We're all over the place.
All the random references.
Writing that down.
No, it's a very interesting comparison. I don't remember which of you, whose idea was it to do this episode? It was yours, Jordan? And I remember when you first made that thought, I was like, that's a weird pair. And when we mentioned in our Discord that this is what we're going to do, people were just like, well, why aren't these people on that list? And why aren't these people like,
and in Downer, it's like, no, we're doing this.
It's like, this is a specific comparison between two characters. I wouldn't mind doing something like this for other characters in the future. But I like this 1-to-1 rather than, this one. I like looking in and just getting at the meat, because I don't know whether Brandon did this intentionally. I doubt that he did, but at the same time, he didn't do it unintentionally, if that makes sense. It's like
like when I've written fanfics and things like that will never see the light of day. But I've found myself falling into the same kind of character arcs and tropes, and like realizing, okay, I can do it better if I do it this way. And it wasn't always a conscious thing. And so I'm sure Brandon has moments where he's like, okay, I really want to figure out how to do this better. And I mean, there is a big gap from when he was writing Stormlight from Final Empire. So he would have had time to grow as a writer. And I don't know that he intentionally was like, I'm going to try and write the same kind of character arc.
No.
Different start. It was, this is an interesting way to do it. And
well, no, part of it is he's just playing with character archetypes
and character dynamics and relationships and everything else. Yeah.
But Brandon is really good at the concept of everyone is the hero of their own story. And he allowed that to Elhokar.
To Gavilar, and to Kelsier, and to Vin.
And to everybody.
Yeah. To completely flawed people. The other thing that's interesting is when I suggested this about 2 years ago, I think.
It's been a while, yeah.
It was a long time ago. This one's been.
We had a very different image of Gavilar when I first said it.
Oh, that's right.
It'd be very interesting to know, what does this conversation look like if we had done it 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yeah.
Before Rhythm of War.
It's like, oh, he was such a good dad. No.
Well, we wouldn't have said that part, but we wouldn't have thought he's a monster.
I would have actually probably thought he was a good dad, because again, you see the admiration for him from both Elhokar and Jasnah. We just have Dalinar, a bit more context.
Everybody else is like, oh, he's so great. And I mean, I don't remember us seeing any lines from Navani of her degrading him.
Well, no, because she said, I will ruin you. Then he died. And she was, she's like, I'm going to take all this, to my grave, because she suddenly realizes
I'm going to turn him into the hero. He's the hero that Elhokar deserves, not the
not the one. Yeah.
And she's going to give Elhokar the hero that they deserve, not the one that he actually was.
Yeah, because she can't.
Well, because if she did that, it would tear the kingdom apart. And you know what? Most likely get her kids killed, because a civil war would probably break out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so she does. So she does it a lot out of practicality.
Yeah, and they would be the first targets. The kids and Dalinar would be and her would be the top, because that's
Stormfather help whoever comes after Dalinar.
Oh man.
Depends on which Dalinar, because at that point Dalinar was not the
I just fear if you go to war with him, it's just like you threaten bringing out the Blackthorn.
Right. I'm just saying at that point he may have welcomed it. At the point of Gavilar's death.
Yeah.
I'm now imagining Dalinar with this wrestling-like introduction, and it's like, if you won't take the Blonde Smith, you get the Blackthorn.
Oh man.
The Blonde Smith. You mean the Blonde Thorn?
No, I was trying to say Bondsmith.
Oh, Bondsmith. Okay.
I mean, although
the
that
Blonde
was our
Thorn,
nickname for Adolin early
the Blonde
on.
Thorn?
The Blonde
Yeah.
Thorn.
Oh boy. Guys, this has been a
Actually,
cool
the
conversation.
Golden Thorn would be a really good like nickname for him.
Yeah. Also a cool tavern name.
Yeah.
This has been a meaty discussion. I've enjoyed this like more than I expected to going into it. I think it's been a lot of fun. To our listeners, though, we love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this discussion, let us know, because if you want us to have more conversations like this, write to us. You can also ask us about the Cosmere. You can drop us your ideas for other topics you'd like us to discuss during the show. And while you're at it, we would love to hear your feedback about how you think we're doing, as well as any interesting theories you might have about what's going on in the Cosmere and on any of the specific planets in the Cosmere as well. You can send all questions and suggestions in a brief, concise email to cosmerestudies@gmail.com, and we can read it as part of the show. You can also write us at the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, P.O. Box 970063, Orem, Utah 84097. Now, outside of this show, we've got our own personal products. So, Jordan, why don't you tell us what you're up to and where we can find you?
All right. Well, number one, if you're listening to this and you are a patron and you would like to participate in that call-in show talking about Shadows of Self, again, just find the Jordan room in our Discord. Let me know that you want to participate so I can get an idea of how many people want to participate and plan accordingly. So that's the most important thing. But next, most importantly, this Saturday, I actually got to play part of the playtest for Moonbreaker. Very interesting. It is very interesting. The painting of the miniatures is actually a fairly robust tool.
Very robust.
The game has some balance issues that they have got to fix.
Which have been brought up in their feedback channels on the Discord.
So I'm hoping it gets brought up. This was a playtest week, so that's exactly the type of thing that they're...
Speaking of, and I didn't mention this in our news, this weekend is also another playtest week. So if you're interested in playing Moonbreaker, it doesn't go into the plot, which is what Brandon was involved in. Mm-hmm. But if you're interested in checking out the game and seeing what it's like, they're going to have a free weekend this weekend on Steam. So
yeah, so there's a chance I'll do that again this Saturday. I can't commit to it just yet because the other thing I'm working on is the Pro Amiibo League has officially started. We've already gotten some heartbreaking results, and I'm going to have to host 2 reverse Hunger Game tournaments where basically there's like 11 people fighting for 10 slots. So I instead have to host what is going to be a gut-wrenching tournament where you advance by losing. Only one person gets left out. And there
can be all but one.
Yes, all but one. And so because we're embracing the horror, we're calling it the Starvation Games. And
I was going to call it Lowlander.
No, that's a different thing. But yeah, and so look, you can only embrace the horror when you have to do something like this. So I recommend you go to youtube.com/splicestream to follow my stuff. Again, if we're going to be doing the Moonbreaker stuff, come with us on Saturday.
Cool. Amy, how about you?
So my Facebook is Coincidence Cosplay and Props. My Twitter is @CoincidenceCosp because my name is too long. My Instagram is @coincidence_cosplay, and my TikTok is @coincidencecosplay, all one long word. And my website is www.coincidencecosplay.com. I have not been able to craft too much stuff, but my Imperial officer from Star Wars is pretty close to done, which I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but I'm planning on doing that. It's kind of a jokey thing. Like there's somebody on TikTok who she's also on YouTube, I think, but she does Imperial HR, and she calls herself Dolores, and she goes around and hands out citations to people, and it's hilarious. She's awesome.
Nice.
I think it's like Stardust Flower or something like that. Anyway, it's a reference to Rogue One. Is her name.
Stardust, okay.
And yeah, and so anyway, so I'm doing that, and I'm planning on doing my Nazgul and my Imperial officer, and then I might do Tremaine for FanX, which is coming up in 2 weeks, something like that. It's the 22nd of September.
For our listeners who aren't deep Disney aficionados, Tremaine is
Cinderella's stepmother.
Lady Tremaine is
Lady Tremaine. Yes. Sorry, I
evil
didn't know before
stepmother.
I did her. The evil stepmother. Yes, her. So the big giant gray wig, and like I go around and complain about Cinderella. It's great.
She's also
that wig
secretly
is-
a vampire. She has the same hairdo as Count Dracula.
She does. Yeah, it's a terrible hairdo. Anyway, but yeah, so that's what I'm planning to do, and I'm gonna move my website off of where it's being hosted, so hopefully it'll look better before next month, because I don't want to pay them again for hosting it anymore. Where I've been hosting it. So yep.
All right. And as for myself, I have another podcast. My friend Dylan and I talk about board games. It's pretty short. We have episodes that typically last between 15 and 20 minutes, so we try and keep it bite-sized. It's called The Innkeeper's Table, and we have new episodes on Friday mornings. So most recently, we did another top 3 list. It was our top 3 games to take with us on vacation. And the next episode that's coming out, we had a mailbag episode and answered a listener question who was asking about games for preteens, but wouldn't make adults go crazy. And I believe the phrasing they used was "want to chew tinfoil." So it was a fun discussion.
I've never heard of that phrase as a reference. Normally it's, I'd rather, gnaw off my own arm, but yeah, that's just a better version of that. That's just better.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the one that's coming out this next week. And fun discussion as always. And, who doesn't love a good discussion about board games?
Only evil people. I bet
Exactly.
Gavilar doesn't enjoy discussions.
Gavilar probably hates board games.
And puppies.
But Dalinar likes board games because he and Shalon make a 3D image where they can have their ultimate board game.
Now I'm imagining some alternate universe where like they're playing D&D and Dalinar is the GM.
I'm in.
Okay, now Shalon, move the thing over there. Yeah.
I am so in. For those of our listeners who want to support the Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies, but you can't become patrons, we'd love it if you just let your friends know about the show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, to like and subscribe over on youtube.com/Cosmere Studies. And if you would toss us a good review wherever you listen, we would love that. That would be amazing. We appreciate you.
Given with that, if you do leave a review, please list what character types each character would be in this campaign.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, man. Now I want to try and do that. Dang it.
Also, head on over to store.streamelements.com/Cosmere Studies to buy SICS merch. Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies merch. All right, guys. Final thoughts on this Shadows of Giants comparison we've been talking about all night.
Poor Elhokar and Vin and Gavilar can die in a pit. So, that's...
Well, he kind of did. So, congrats on getting what you wanted. My final thought is I was really nervous when I suggested this, so I'm glad it worked out.
I think it worked out great, and I would love to have more conversations where we're at like character analysis and comparisons and stuff, because I think that there's a lot of stuff like this that really lend to an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, he's a writer. There's always going to be tropes that repeat with any writer. Like, I mean, the number of perfectly matched marriages he's done in his series. But
perfectly arranged,
arranged, not matched. Yeah, yes. Perfectly arranged marriages. He likes that trope.
Yes, he does. All right. Well, special thanks to our patron producer, Mim's Laundry Service. We can't mend your relationships, but we can mend your clothes, and that's almost as good. In addition to the live episodes of the show that stream on twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table every 2 weeks on Monday nights at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, listeners can find our videos on YouTube or audio versions of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and just about any other service that carries podcasts by searching for Cosmere Studies. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the profile @Cosmere Studies. Next time, we are taking a closer look at chasm fiends. What are they? What's the deal with the ones that are just chilling out at the end of Rhythm of War? Yeah. Join us on Monday, September 26, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern at www.twitch.tv/Innkeeper's Table to hear our discussion live. Until then, though, on behalf of Amy, Jordan, and myself, thanks for listening, and remember, There's always another
secret.
secret.